Good morning, everyone. Welcome to day 3 of the symposium here at Calvin. I hope that you have been having your heads filled and your hearts filled, and that you're still eager for a little bit more learning today before the day is done, because it's not over yet. My name is Ruth Schuringa, and I'm the worship director at Mountain View Christian Reformed Church in Grimsby, Ontario, Canada. And I'm really pleased to be moderating this discussion with these awesome worship leaders and planners and preachers on this panel, talking about Holy Week planning. So if you're here for Holy Week planning, you're in the right spot. If you're not, there's probably a different room where you wanted to be, but this is where Holy Week planning is. Let's begin with prayer. Creator God, thank you. Thank you for this space and for this time that we have together. Thank you for the opportunity and the riches of being able to plan for Holy Week worship. Thank you for the participants that have come, for the churches and families they represent, and for the work that they have done and are doing in their ministries for you. Thank you for these panelists and for all the knowledge and skill that they bring to this space. And I pray that you would give each one of us courage and strength and peace and good ideas to share in this place. God, we pray that you would continue to bless our time at the symposium, that you would continue to fill our hearts with the joy of worshiping you. In Jesus' name, amen. So first, I'm going to have the panel introduce themselves, tell us a little bit about who you are, where you're from, and the context that you're planning worship, because that will help us know exactly what each church represents. So we'll start with Chris.
Good morning, everyone. My name's Chris Walker. I'm a local, 40 minutes from here on the lovely shores of Lake Michigan. I live in Grand Haven. I'm a pastor of worship and arts at Covenant Life Church. I've been there for about 13 years. It's about a 35-year-old church in an old piano factory that has been rejuvenated and remade. Worship is contemporary in style. We try to use modern music mixed with new versions of classic hymns as well, to stay rooted in the tradition as well, and informed by classic historic liturgy from the Reformed tradition as well. So most of our people wouldn't leave church on a Sunday morning saying that they were part of a liturgical, whatever that means, service. But they were, because we've been following the movements of what the church has practiced together in the fourfold worship order, even with our modern music expressions. So we're in the Reformed tradition, and it's been really a gift to call that place home for the last almost decade and a half now.
I remember that I was also going to ask you what your favorite Holy Week song was. Not your favorite, but the one that you feel like is a go-to, minus the classics.
Well, when you mentioned this earlier, I was going to say, there is a fountain filled with blood. Do you guys know that one? It feels like heavy metal, right? There's a fountain filled with blood drawn from Emmanuel's veins. That's so epic. But I've never really been a part of a church that's done that song well. So that's more of an adjacent love of that song. But actually, my go-to songs for Holy Week come from a friend, an original song from a friend. He wrote a song called The Restoration of All Things, and then he also created a setting for Where Cross the Crowded Ways of Life. Stunning song, and a beautiful version that I'm grateful my friend has shared that gift with me. So,
thanks. Elly? That was also my song that I which again, we don't do either. There's a fountain filled with blood. I find people have a lot of difficulty with blood songs. I am Elly Boersma Sarkany. I am across the border in Niagara, Ontario. St. Catharines is where I'm serving. I grew up on the west coast of Canada in Vancouver, so for me, Holy Week has been an adjustment weather-wise, because Ontario is a lot colder than Vancouver. And Vancouver, it's usually spring. Ontario, it's usually not in April. So
my context, I'm also in a Christian Reformed church. It sounds like we're pretty similar to Chris's context, probably leaning a little bit more towards the more obviously liturgical end of things. It's a church that started in the 70s with a lot of Dutch immigrants to Canada. There was a lot of post-war immigration that came into Canada in the late 50s, and then a lot of those churches around the 70s were exploding with a lot of children from those Dutch immigrant families. So there's a large tradition of, I would say we're in a mixed generational culture. So we have a lot of our seniors are originally from the Netherlands, and then as you get to the younger generations, like my parents were born in the Netherlands, but I'm from Canada, and then younger than me, you get to kids and teens and young adults who don't really associate with the Dutch anymore. So we're kind of in this transitional culture period too. So we're trying to navigate that world of sort of convergent worship, of maintaining this strong history of where we came from, but then also fitting with our current contemporary culture in Canada as well. And song-wise, I love the classics for Holy Week, really. But one that we've kind of leaned into quite a bit for our church is, it's actually from the Psalm Project, a Dutch collective, and they do this beautiful setting of Psalm 22, which is called My God, Why? And I just love how it captures the mournful cry that you hear in that psalm, and it's just such a beautiful solo piece. So we don't do it congregationally, but we'll usually have someone lead it solo. And that's one of my favorites.
My name is Rodrigo Cano. I'm from across the lake, so I'm in the Chicagoland area, and I serve as a pastor of a multi-site church, but I also serve in we have a worship team or worship band that is part of our church called Community Music, and I get to play there with them. We write songs and we do a lot of things, and so we do a lot of the planning for our multi-site. And also for something that we are calling micro churches. So we provide music for micro churches that we have started, and I get to play a role in there as well. And I like the classics too. But very contemporary church, and so I like "Oh Praise the Name." I love that song.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ritsema-Roelofs. Home for me is out on the East Coast, so we're kind of geographically pinpointed all over the map. On the East Coast in the greater Washington, D.C. area. I served at a church in Washington, D.C. for 16 years before kind of shifting. So now I wear two different hats. I'm the worship consultant for Thrive, which is an agency of the Christian Reformed Church. And I also work for Fuller Seminary directing their Worship for Workers project, kind of a faith and work vocation project. So I've been out of Holy Week planning now for 2 years, and it's still a little bit discombobulating. But yeah, had many years of doing Holy Week. So looking forward to the opportunity to talk with you all today. Songs. I think one of the most profound memories I have of a Holy Week service. The very end of the service comes and you extinguish the Christ candle, and that's usually the moment where everybody sings, "Were you there?" Right? And instead, one year we had a soloist who stood in the back who started singing, "This is my Father's world. Oh, let me not forget that though the wrong right here, right now is great and strong, God is the ruler yet." And that was a moment that I think I won't ever forget.
My name is Jang. I am the director of music at Woodland Christian Reformed Church. Our worshiping space is Calvin University Chapel. So if you attended any workshops or Vesper services there, that is my home ground. We have organ, of course. Organ is our primary instrument of worship. We have choir and orchestra that plays monthly, handbook choir that plays monthly as well. We, as a congregation, hardly ever depart from our 3 hymnals. Mostly our Lift Up Your Hearts, red hymnal. Sometimes Psalms for All Seasons, our blue hymnal. And then sometimes Sing New Creation, that's our green. We stick to our books. And it helps that I love those books. For song, okay. I'm thinking You, O Lord, are both Lamb and Shepherd. Christus Paradox by a text by Sylvia Dunstan, and the tune Pickery has a beautiful tune that evokes the sense of mystery and wonder, and the sense of irony and paradox that is highlighted during the Holy Week, and especially on Palm Sunday. You who we both scorn and crave, yeah, that's that. I would say that is my go-to.
So lots of diversity in the context up here and probably out there as well. I was thinking when we were talking about Holy Week that what does that mean for all of us? Palm Sunday, for sure. Good Friday, for sure. Easter Sunday. But are there any others that you have in your churches or that you might have? Does anybody have a Maundy Thursday service on Thursday night? Nice. Okay, so maybe we'll have some examples of that. What about a Saturday vigil? Oh, there's a couple. Awesome. Okay, I'd love to hear a little bit about that because I've not experienced that other than at the worship symposium back in the day when it was called Colam and way back, a long time ago. So what we'd like to do now is share a couple of best practices. Maybe a few of you could share some of your best practices for that Holy Week, for any of those services that we've mentioned. I'll start with Elly, but after that you guys can pop in if you like, because she's looking straight at me right now, so of course I'm going to ask her.
I thought by sitting in the middle I wouldn't ever have to go first, but I shouldn't have revealed that to Ruth then. I'm going to give an example, actually, of a project that we did a few years ago. It was, I think, 2019. And it was part of Holy Week, but it actually was something that we did throughout all of Lent. And so we had these prayer stations set up. And at one of the prayer stations, there were tiles, and just these like square bathroom tiles that we stained a little bit with red. And at the station, people were invited to just take time in confession and then to write maybe a word that represented their confession onto those tiles. And then for the Good Friday service, we wanted to make a mosaic. And so the end vision was this cross that was a mosaic of shattered pieces from these tiles that connected in with, I think it was Colossians 2:15, which talks about how Christ made a spectacle of our sins on the cross. And so to take these tiles and to place them on the cross and to show how Christ conquered all of this. And so then through Good Friday, we had these tiles placed at the front of the sanctuary. And we typically will make it a very narrative service and go through the passion narrative. And then at the point where Christ is nailed to the cross, our youth pastor actually read that section, and then we had him walk and take a hammer and smash each of those tiles. And the thud in the silent room, I knew it was coming, and it blew me away. It was just this moment of crashing that just, the thud. You could almost hear this audible gasp in the room, and it was, I think for us as a congregation, it was this collective, really poignant moment. But then we took those shards, and one of our young adults made a stop-motion video of it that we used as our call to worship on Sunday morning of this black outline of a cross and these tile pieces that are gradually coming in. And she used the Hillsong song Broken Vessels, and so it was talking about all these pieces broken and shattered. And then Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound. And it grew, there's this transition that it goes from almost this instrumental part, right, that builds back into the chorus. And through that instrumental, then in the background of this video, you see the stone rolled away from the tomb, and then this voice that says, "It is finished." And it was incredible, the work that she did to put it together, but it was just this assembly of the cross, and then it finished off with the Colossians 2:15 verse at the end, and it just tied in the whole Lent, Good Friday, and Easter all together into this beautiful picture. And now it's this cross that hangs in our fellowship hall that we see every week.
That's beautiful. Thank you. That's really awesome. I'm going to keep that also in my own head, just not writing it down. Anyone else? Something to share? Or make sure if you have a question for the person, like you're like, how did that work or happen? You just put up your hand. Anyone else want to share anything here?
Yeah, well, okay, for context real quick, I never grew up in a context, even though I was in the church, our church tradition, we didn't actually do anything other than Palm Sunday and Easter Sunday. So we didn't do Good Friday, at least that I was aware of as a kid. And then my church through college and, for a stretch there of my early adulthood, we also did not do anything Good Friday. So literally, like I said, I've been at my church for about 13 years. That was the first time that I ever entered into Holy Week, which was, so for me, all of it has been new, but it's only been since COVID that what we've done is particularly a Good Friday service. And so if you have a Good Friday service, don't underestimate how beautiful it is to just sing and remember the story together, because that in and of itself feels fresh and beautiful and new and meaningful and deep for me, because this year's only going to be my third time as part of a Good Friday service. But pre-COVID, it was about 15 years total, and I was part of that, whatever the math works out to. I count to 4 over and over again as a musician, so I don't know what the math works out there. But what we did was a Stations of the Cross experience. Anybody Stations of the Cross? All right, excellent. And so that was our Holy Week, and we got to a point where it was about 100 volunteers, and it was hundreds of hours, and particularly it was an experiential journey with Jesus through his final hours. And we would open it on Wednesday evening, and it would be open through Friday night, and people could come and go through it at their own pace. And each station had the same format. So what Elly's describing, we refer to that as an interactive. And each station would have the story from Scripture that station represented, and then it would have a meditation of some sort on that, because you can pull from each of those narratives, you can pull so many different beautiful angles to ponder about what Christ is doing, what the Spirit's work is in the moment, who we are as humans, and all those different things. And so there'd be the scripture text, there'd be a meditation of some sort, and then there'd be an interactive. And so take Elly's example there, we would have that in like 9 or 10 different stations every year. And so each year we would build it differently as well. Like there'd be sort of a creative improv around what are we going to do with the stations. And this was started by my predecessor, my friend Steve, he and his family moved into global missions, and I was hired on, so we still talk about this often. But really, it was always, what's the way we're going to reflect the gospel story in each of these stations this year, because it's a new opportunity, it's a new chance. And it's still the same story, beautifully, mercifully, it's the same story, but we get to enter that story in different ways. So it usually would begin, Station 1 for us would usually begin in the Garden of Gethsemane. And I happen to have a friend in my church family who owns a landscaping business. And he would deliver a bunch of strange-looking trees and landscaping rocks and things, and we would turn one of the spaces into the garden. And so, like one year, we leaned heavily on the image of the olive tree and the olive press that many of you know about, that is in the Garden of Gethsemane, and then leaned on the idea of Jesus being crushed for our iniquities. And so the interactive, after dwelling with that, was to literally take an olive from a bowl and crush it on a stone with another rock, and to just dwell on like Jesus being crushed. Like, what a word, right? And then you could just sit in that space for as long as you needed to, and then move on to the next station when you're ready. And this was our way of hopefully entering into the story and walking alongside Jesus and remembering all of these things. So for us, we're only now coming back to like the Good Friday classics that we sing together, because we're partnering with a church in the area, and the two of us together collectively have done Good Friday together the last 2 years, and we're doing it this year again. But there is still a pull of like, maybe we can return back to that, because that felt like a unique way to walk through the story that we don't do in any other season at all. And it definitely was transformational and moving, especially there was always a cross where you could hammer a nail into the cross. That station never changed. And that sound just pinging through the church, like Elly mentioned, it is a gut punch, but in the best way, right? To remember the beauty of the grace and mercy of Jesus Christ.
Thanks, Chris.
What Chris said just kind of struck a little bit of a chord. We have the privilege of telling a story every year, right? It's not our story. It's the story. And that in and of itself should be beautiful and unique and creative enough. Our work is done for us in many ways, right? And I've often, I'm going in a totally different direction here for just a second, but someone said this to me once, and it's really stuck with me. It doesn't have to be fantastic. It has to be faithful. And even as we talk through all of these ideas, because there's so many good and imaginative and creative ways to tell the story, but let the story speak for itself, and let there be enough power within the story. That's the main event, right? One year we actually did something totally, I'm going to say every year we did this thing and it was totally different. But we kept Good Friday so simple. Literally stripped the sanctuary bare. There was not a thing in there, and it's like flesh-colored walls and like very poor decor, nothing in it at all. And we wove the refrain, I love to tell the story, 'twill be my theme and glory, to tell the old story of Jesus and his love. We wove that through the whole service. We started with our oldest member sitting in a rocking chair saying, tonight we tell the story. And it's a familiar story that we've heard over and over and over again, but Holy Spirit, would you enter into this story and make it new and make it ours again tonight? Super simple. And let that story speak for itself, because there's enough power within it to let it do that.
Thanks, Katie, so much. That was great. Chan or Rodrigo, do you have anything?
Yeah, speaking of telling the story faithfully, one of our practices is to, on Palm Sunday, we begin with telling the story of the Palm procession, Jesus' triumphant entry to Jerusalem. But that's only the first half of the service. The second half of the service is about the Passion. And if you look at our hymnal, Lift Up Your Hearts hymnal, you'll see that the section for the Palm Sunday is not called Palm Sunday. It's called Palm Passion Sunday. And I think that's really important, because when we look at Jesus' triumphant entry into Jerusalem, if we think that it's just a celebration, and we adore the children, waving palms, and we begin with all glory, loud, and honor, and we end with all glory, loud, and honor, I think we miss the point of the story. The story is about the irony of the crowd shouting Hosanna. The same crowd, a few days later, shouts, crucify him. And so first half, Palm, Liturgy of the Palms, second half, Liturgy of the Passion, and we tell the story of the full story of Jesus' suffering and crucifixion in the Gospel of Matthew, and that is often a dramatic reading. We have multiple readers reading in different characters of the story. And we leave the sanctuary in silence at the end. So a stark contrast between the beginning of the service, big celebration, glorious and joyful. At the end, we leave in silence and we ponder, what is to come next now? What now? And practically, I think this is also important for those of us who come to Palm Sunday service, skip Monday, Thursday, skip Good Friday, and come in Easter service. And so if the Palm Sunday service is all celebration, all joyful, then for those people, we kind of make them miss the opportunity to wonder and to ponder in silence.
Thank you. We often leave the Good Friday service in silence, but I have not thought about beginning Holy Week basically in silence, the end of Sunday.
Yeah, and it sets the tone for the rest of the week.
Thank you. Your turn, Rodrigo.
I think from the preaching perspective, it's such a great opportunity. I mean, the story itself speaks powerfully, but I think also like how do we engage people through the story, and even just like through the whole week, right? Of like Palm Sunday, and what does that represent? And something that has helped us is have like a daily devotionals that we send to our people all throughout the week that is preparing them for what's to come on Friday and what's to come on Sunday. And very intentional about the language that we use, how we envision the Holy Week to be experienced as a community of faith, even though we're not meeting Monday through until Friday, but for us to experience it together as people go to work and people go to do many different things, for them to be mindful of, okay, this week is special for us to celebrate together. And something else, I mean, we mean this, we call them Christers, right? Like there's people who come to Christmas and Easter, and that's the only times they come to church. And so also like to not miss that opportunity to preach the gospel for the people that for whatever reason, those are the times of the year that come to church. But like making a welcoming atmosphere where they feel welcome and they feel appreciated, and we're speaking to things. Obviously, the story speaks for itself, and the story speaks about the realities that we live in today. But taking that opportunity as an evangelistic opportunity, like this story applies to you. This story brings you hope. This story can be with you, not only on Christmas and Easter, but the rest of the year. So we want to invite you to come and explore what it means to follow Christ through what happens in Holy Week. Yeah.
So important. Yeah, thanks. We've already shared some ideas that feel like they are intergenerational and family-friendly ideas, right? Especially with the interactive kinds of things. But I'm wondering if any of you have a specific example of ways that you've involved kids or intergenerational ideas in worship. I know you have an idea.
The Stations of the Cross experience lent itself to interactive kind of journey with our children, which was really great. We actually, when we started it, did not have kids in mind. And then we had kids in mind almost too particularly, where we created a whole separate track for them to walk through the stations, working with our family ministries team to try and process how can we do this well for them. And in addition, we have quite a few of my friends that are part of our church family are also young adults or adults with special needs that might have cognitive level of children as well, and so we have them in mind as well. But then we realized that kids are smart, and kids understand that death is part of the world. Every Disney movie, the parents are dead or whatever, right? But kids need a guide in helping to understand that and understand Christ's death, and that it's not the end, the resurrection as well. And so it really became family discipleship for us in a lot of ways, for parents or grandparents to bring their kids through. And a lot of times parents might come through and have sort of their own journey, or a small group would come through and have their own journey through the stations and then come back with their kids later so that they could focus on trying to shepherd them well without having to try and have their own sort of independent experience as well, but a shared experience in multiple ways. So if you're particularly looking for that, you're considering stations as a way to enter the Holy Week narrative, that is a really great way to pull children in. Work with the people who know your kids best, and they can help you guide that for sure. But I'm taking notes because, like I said, we're early in the Good Friday service thing, and we haven't done anything well yet. So give me some ideas.
Go ahead, Elly. I'll just move across here, if that's okay.
Yeah, we, like, throughout the year, we're pretty intentional at our church about incorporating all ages into different leadership roles of musical leadership, reading. I find artwork is another really great way to include kids in worship, to prepare something for our Good Friday or Easter. Yeah, you give them one year we did different characters from the narrative, and we said, draw me a picture of Peter. What does Peter look like for you? And just the beauty of what they came up with, and then the little graphics that you get, like there was a rooster in the background, and so you could tell that they'd really thought about, like, oh, what encompasses who Peter was as a person. So yeah, I find a lot of hands-on things. This year, actually, we're trying to figure out a better way to. We would always have our children's worship program would be like a choir, and it was kind of like a forced thing that if you go to children's worship, you're going to learn this song, and then you're going to come up and you're going to sing it for everybody. And a handful of kids love that, and a lot of them are scared sick. Like, they don't want to be up there, or it's just, yeah, and we don't want to make worship a dreadful experience for them. So we're looking at ways this year to really interact with the kids and say, hey, like, what's something that you're really passionate about, and how can you use that gift to serve the church in a unique way this year? And so we're kind of scrapping this is how we've always done it, and we're just going to keep doing it the way we've always done it, and to actually start looking into if they're really eager to be part of dramatic arts, or maybe they love to read things, or they are super creative and love to create something, or they like movement, or just to create spaces for them to be able to use and develop those gifts with adults by their side, and do very intergenerational ministry that way. So
Thanks. Go ahead.
Something that we've done is, so we provide parents like guides and talking points so that they know how to talk to their kids about what's happening throughout Easter, especially Good Friday, right? We talk about death and like very heavy topic of crucifixion and all of these things. And so we want to equip the parents as the main disciplers of the kids on how to have those conversations with the kids. And then we have, for Easter, for example, usually in our services, kids go to separate, have their separate worship, but Easter is one of the times of the year where we worship all together, and we will have some guides throughout for the conversation throughout the service, for some words that we're gonna, like the preacher is gonna make sure that mentions some words, and so the kids are like, oh, okay, like this is, they're talking about this, and they're following like the guide to be engaged into what's happening throughout the service. Yeah.
I like that. Yeah. Thank you.
Quick show of hands. How many of you have some kind of children in worship program? Like the kids leave the service and they go to some kind of children worship. Have you ever thought of bridging the gap by bringing the children's worship content into a Holy Week service? At least in my tradition, children in worship often has a story, right? And you take it out of the box. There's colored fabric, and there's these little wooden figures, and you tell the story in a visual way. But what would it look like to do that on Good Friday? To pull out the box of the Last Supper, or to pull out a story of the Last Supper, bring all of the kids to the front, and tell that story using something that's familiar to them. Large part of your congregation will probably never know what happens behind those doors, and it's not childcare, it's not babysitting, it's actually worship. And it's worship that properly belongs in the worship of the people. So try even one section of a Holy Week service that's in a language and in a style that's familiar to the way that your children worship when they leave the sanctuary and they go to their worship. That might involve, another part of my tradition is asking I wonder questions. As the story is being told to our children in children worship, we often ask, I wonder, because children are so good at that, right? At wonder and curiosity. But what would it look like in the middle of your Good Friday service to stop and say, I wonder how Jesus felt as he was praying in the garden. I wonder if he felt sleepy. I wonder if he felt so scared. I wonder what Jesus was thinking about. Nobody's going to answer those questions, but they just open up your curiosity and imagination a little bit, but again, in a language that's child-friendly and all-age friendly.
And that material is available, right? The children in worship material. We just need to find a church that does that, and then you can ask them those questions. One of the things we did during COVID, when we weren't meeting in person, was we pre-recorded those stories. And perhaps, even in this case, if you don't want all the kids to come up or whatever the logistics of that, you could pre-record a teacher or a parent telling the story to the kids. It saves them from being up on the stage if that's, not a nice experience for them. Or you could do it with a smaller family group. We did that for the whole Stations of the Cross, family groups telling the story at home in the way they wanted to, with their teenagers acting it out or with little children sitting by their grandparents' knee. So there's ways to tell that story, even using video, even while we are also meeting in person. Go ahead.
So in terms of children in worship, that is a growth area for me. So I try to grab the low-hanging fruits, very easy and simple things that I can do. And one thing that I did in the past years was, so Maundy Thursday, communion service, we divided the Passion narrative into 7 readings. 7 readings it can be from any gospel. And we chose 7 objects that can tell the story, right? So visual, objects for children. And so have the parents read the narrative, read the scripture passages, and have the child hold the object next to the parents. And then after the reading, have the child put the object on the communion table. And so as the story goes, we add one more object, another object. And then when you come up to the table for communion later in the service, you pass and see the whole story in your eyes. A tip is that don't try to get all the 7 objects yourself. It was a lot of shopping on Etsy. I did not enjoy that. And shipping is always, yeah. Have the families prepare their own object so that they can talk about it, so that they can kind of own the story.
While we do like to focus on what works really well and what's gone really well in sharing our ideas, your little blooper there about don't do this reminds me of how we joke sometimes about what's the worst idea you've ever had, or what's the thing that you've tried that didn't work that might help some of us in terms of trying something. Is there anything that you've tried that you're like, that did not work, that did not engage? We're all too good.
Just for Holy Week, or that's?
Yeah, we try not to make mistakes during Holy Week. It's a really special time. Okay, another mistake, not Holy Week mistake, if you have one.
We tried burning our palms live one year. Because, you know, the whole impetus of like you wave your palms and then you burn them and those ashes become your ashes for Ash Wednesday the next year. And we thought, wouldn't it be great to do that in worship? Like, let's just set those things on fire in this bowl and then show them that like this will be the ashes for next year. Don't ever try that. I'm just going to go on record. I'm going to say, don't try that. Number one, it's messy. And number two, it's a fire hazard. I'm going to leave you with that. Don't do it.
Oh man, another Ash Wednesday one actually that's kind of triggered for me. We didn't really prepare by burning anything, so I'm like, how do you get ash? And so I talked to somebody who had an outdoor fireplace, and they brought this scoop of ash from their fireplace, which was largely very white and flaky and had little chunks in it. So hours were spent filtering through this ash and then realizing this is really powdery and light colored, so how do I make it dark? And so then I went and bought charcoal, and I'm rubbing the ash with the charcoal and realizing that it's really just like, why can't we just use charcoal, because this is just a disaster, and it was the worst mess. And then I discovered that Catholic supply shops actually can sell you a little baggie. So that was a good learning experience. An Easter fail that came to mind for me was you don't want to do those very often. The song Hallelujah, Salvation and Glory, where it has like the 3 parts to it. So my context is lacking in rhythm. And so it's really hard for them to grab onto something that is starting on an offbeat, for one thing. And I thought, wouldn't it be incredible to have a flash mob on Easter Sunday, when this was back in like 2014, when flash mobs were a big thing, and just have like somebody from that section pop up and sing the Hallelujah, Salvation and Glory, and then you got like the altos come and they join in, and then they're slowly making it to the front. Well, I had about, I think, 8 people sign up for choir. I thought an 8-person flash mob is not a flash mob in a room of 400 people. So yeah, so it was really, I mean, we ended up having to shift gears and change it up. We still did that song on Easter Sunday, and it didn't catch on the way that I had really hoped and dreamed that it would, but it was, okay, this is not going to work with these folks who, one, they join choir because they're not really comfortable jumping up and singing something by themselves in a spot where, that doesn't really happen in our church. So it was just, learning about my context was a big thing that year for me.
I love the idea, though.
One Ash tip, though, while we stuck with Ash Wednesday, because Ash Wednesday is coming up. If you ever find yourself in Elly's situation, you can't get to a craft store, go to a makeup counter and get black eyeshadow. And if you mix that into your ashes, not only do they stick better, but they're darker. Just make sure it's not glittery. But I'm telling you, it works like a charm. It works like a charm, like dark eyeshadow. Mix it in with your ashes, and it's more visible, and it sticks a whole lot better.
That's beautiful.
With our Stations of the Cross, so when we are feeling really epic during Holy Week, it means like lots and lots of candles, right? So during Stations, for us one year, we had the room that was like the station for Jesus's death. I think we had like 250 candles. It was awesome. I heard those gasps. No, it was awesome. Except for the elderly woman with oxygen. FYI, if you're doing lots of candles, it needs to be a big open room. And maybe you don't need 250. It was beautiful, it was stunning, but it also, we never even imagined that that could be a problem. And she was fine, but not for the moment, and we learned some things.
Always learning every year about something that shouldn't be done. So we've talked a little bit about the arts in some of the examples that you've shared, and we haven't talked a lot about music and song, and we probably won't in particular. You all have your context of, the songs and the music that lives for you all. But I'm wondering about the other arts. I mean, visual arts, dramatic arts, using our senses, hearing, smelling, those sorts of things. Have you done any of that during Holy Week?
Well, I mentioned about the children bringing objects to the table, and I guess I can share where I kind of found that idea. I like reading about historical practices. So that idea is actually from 4th century Jerusalem. Maybe know about Egeria's travel, and so during the Holy Week, I have this quote from Kenneth Stevenson. So Jerusalem, 4th century, Palm Sunday evening, they have something called Office of Lamps, so Service of Lamps. It's celebrated in a darkened church with all the morning decorations removed. Behind the altar, a large black panel is hung, and a white cross depicted, surrounded by the instruments of the Passion. So Pilate's whip, crown of thorns, sponge of vinegar, among others. So that's where I drew my idea. Oh, we can do that. The service begins with prayer, hymns, and chant. This is really interesting, concerning the parable of the 10 virgins. Yeah, so does the service of the lamps. But why the parable of the 10 virgins? I thought that was an Advent parable. There is more to that, but happens that the day of Palm Sunday, we can imagine that as another Advent, kind of a 1.5 Advent between the first coming of Christ and the second coming of Christ. And then a whole lot of song choices open up. You can go to Advent section of your hymnal and choose songs from there. You can go to the second coming of Christ. You can go to Ascension and Reign. In fact, the Christus paradox, you, O Lord, are our lamb and shepherd. Yes, that one. Ascension and Reign.
What goes around comes around, right? Ancient Future Worship, isn't that a name of Robert Weber's book? Ancient Future. Anyone else want to share a little bit about any of the arts, other arts besides musical arts?
I would just encourage you that you have artists in your church family. And if you don't, for whatever reason, you have them in your community. And it might even be a new open door of connection to artists in your community to be invited to participate in something like this. We're doing something kind of new this year for us where we've had artists within our church family create things by commission. Like we'll let them know, hey, we want to try and do this. Can you create a painting or can you create a work of some sort? And that's been really great. That's been really beautiful. This year, after we launch into Lent here soon, we're going to put out a call for artworks that deal with death and resurrection. Any medium, but we're gonna put out some guidelines and ask people to turn in works for this that we would install in the church then for Holy Week. People could come in and sit with the artworks. Depending on what comes in, my wife is an art history professor. I might ask her if she could do like an evening of kind of walking through people, teaching people how to look, like learning how to look at a work of art and ask the right questions of it and engage with it. And then leave that installation up through the summer, maybe. But that also, in addition to the artists that you might have that you don't even know that are in your church family and might come out of the woodwork, if there's a space there to reach out to artists in your community as well, there might be a brand new connection to faith for them. And obviously that needs to become a relationship that can build trust and that sort of thing, and you can speak into it in a way that's shepherding and caring. But the visual arts, the old saying, a picture's worth 1,000 words, that can be true in a lot of ways, but the creation process itself can be worth so many more. And if that can be shared in partnership in some way, even saying to an artist, hey, if I buy your materials for you, I know you paint, can I buy you canvas and oil paints, and you can paint a series of paintings for us? Then there can be a partnership there that can be even richer and deeper and can take you into the story in ways that you may not have been entered into it as well. So it can be personally enriching. I've encountered that from my friend Chris, who's a sketch artist, and he actually drew for our stations one year. Post-COVID, we were so minimalist in wanting to still try and do something with stations that he just drew these giant images that sort of represented each station, and it was just the text and this really sparse image. And it was still really meaningful, it was still really beautiful, but particularly that was for me, like selfishly, that because of my friend's journey through that and how he shared that with me as well. But they're there, they're lurking if you don't know them. So put out a call, start asking around, and there might be a way that the Spirit moves you to invite them to participate for those visual arts or dance or other arts to come alive during that week for you.
Thank you. That's lovely. We have a young teenager in our church who is a dancer, and it's not often that we get to incorporate that sort of thing, but she had to work on a project for her high school on a song and work on, section 30 seconds at a time, and by the time it was Christmas, then she had a song ready. And she couldn't do it on our stage because there's just too much that we'd have to clear out, and she needs a big, dance floor. So she recorded it for us with the song that she did it to, and we watched it during the Christmas Eve service, and it's really beautiful. That's not Holy Week, though. That's not allowed. We're not sharing that idea. Oops. All right, one more idea, and then I'd love to hear your questions. The microphone is there. Questions or your ideas or anything that you feel like I came here to hear this and I didn't hear anything about that. Go ahead and ask that.
Got one more. You might not have a congregation that does dance, right? That's probably not something that a ton of congregations are gifted with the ability to do, at least not do it without it feeling a little bit awkward. But what are ways that you can actually embody the story? If you haven't read David Taylor's book, A Body of Praise, I highly recommend it, about re-embodying and reincarnating our worship again, especially after the distance of COVID. People might not be able to dance, but what are small movements that could be done with your body throughout the story? Just trying to think of some, like off the top of my head, like ask your congregation to clench their fists as you read Peter's denial, right? To feel the weight of what it feels like to try to hold on to something and speak through that denial. What does it look like then for them to cover their eyes? Like literally just cover your eyes as the story is being read about Jesus being nailed to the cross. Small acts that can be done with your body that they trigger different sides of your brain to operate and to hear it and to experience it in a different way. It's not dance and it's not a flash mob, which is really cool, but something small and tangible. Body of Praise. Yep, it's upstairs and it's 40% off.
And Katie will be hosting a conversation on that book in a couple months, I think. Anything else?
Something that we haven't really talked about is those of us who have online presence. We have to be mindful of that as well. Like, how do we make it engaging enough that people who are watching in their homes or wherever they're watching, they still get to experience Easter in a way, or Holy Week in a way that it's, impactful and that it's engaging for them. And so, I don't have like very unique examples of how to do that, but I think we just need to be mindful of that in your context. Whatever role, because I know with online presence, it can mean many different things, right? It's for some churches is, if you're sick or you're on vacation, you can watch it as that. But for some other churches, it's it's like an expression of their church, right? It's an actual expression of the church. And so just to be mindful of that and how to do that and work with your teams and with your pastor. I'm a pastor here, so I always like to work with worship artists. And so like to make sure that there's cohesiveness into what is trying to be accomplished. And it might not be the same thing that you're trying to accomplish in the in-person experience. It can be something different. Just have to be mindful of what that is and be intentional about how you approach it.
We have a number of elderly people who watch on live stream, and we make a point of bringing packages of things to them, some of the communication from the church. But if we were to do something that had a tangible thing or that the congregation got to pick up in the service, we would also try and bring that to them as well. If there was a rock or something that we were using in worship, that way they could at least experience that a little bit more physically.